It's nice to be back. I must say, second or third time in a city like this, you can actually go out jogging and not get lost. The last time I was here, I got painfully lost. Fortunately, everybody speaks English, and it was possible to get back to the hotel. It's wonderful to be here again. I once thought that, having met Ulf and Bo, that you had to be really tall to be involved in this effort, but I've been assured that we shorter people have a place. I've been asked to talk about the challenges facing the global innovation ecosystem, which is not a small topic. I'm going to try to outline some of the problems that I see and maybe some overly simple things that are possible to do about that. Let me start with some of the challenges. Some are unique to the U.S., some are problems faced by Europe, and some even are faced by the innovation hotspots of like Singapore, China, India, and other Asian nations. So I'll give you six. The first one is the problem, this may be mostly in the U.S., of significantly reduced venture capital investment in innovative startup companies, and the flight of a large portion of the remaining venture capital overseas from the U.S. to those innovation hotspots that are left. The New York Times reported 2 weeks ago that venture capital is running at the lowest levels in over a decade, and even angel investors, and these are individuals mainly, who invest in even smaller companies than venture funds do, are holding back. This is a serious problem because historically venture capital has been the key ingredient in the innovation ecosystem that enables small startups, the sources of most of the truly disruptive innovation over the last 40 years, to grow into successful companies. Research has shown, for example, that $1 of venture capital is worth 10 times more effective in stimulating patentable research as $1 of corporate R&D. I work for a company that's going to spend $9.3 billion in R&D this year, so that 10-to-1 ratio hits home. That same research found that while venture capital amounted to 3% of corporate R&D, it accounted for 15% of all industrial innovation, so you can sort of see how that ratio works. One major reason for this reduced investment is the second challenge, and that's especially in the U.S., but also in other regions of the world. The ability of innovative startups with promising new technology to go public has basically evaporated. That same Times article basically said that public offerings are really not available anymore. Let me give you some numbers on that. In 2007, there were 554 IPOs in the United States, initial public offerings. In 2008, that number had gone down to 118. And this year, with 3/4 of the year basically out of the way, we're at 37 in the United States. This used to be a major cottage industry in the United States. It has totally evaporated. So if you don't have an exit strategy, or put another way, if there's no chance for entrepreneurs and technologists and venture capitalists who mature them to get rich by inventing the next big thing, then innovation dies on the vine. Instead, the only exit strategy left for most startups and their investors is to be acquired by larger companies. Now, big companies like Microsoft and Google and Apple do innovate, and presumably when they acquire a startup, they put the innovations of those firms to good use. But as I noted earlier, generally speaking, large firms simply do not produce as many of this disruptive, world-changing innovations that lead to the emergence of whole new industries and major job growth that we saw produced by startups in the telecom, semiconductor, personal computer, wireless, and internet sectors over the past 40 years. I could put other sectors in there too if you wanted to go to the biotech world as well. A third challenge is the decline, especially in the U.S., of government-funded support for basic and applied research. Here we are seeing only modest growth or even declines over the last decade in government-supported R&D in the U.S. and in the EU. This is a problem because historically, such government support for early-stage research has been a critical factor in the emergence of world-changing innovations and whole new industries. We can, for example, go back to the early 20th century in the United States, where agriculture experiment stations backed by national and state governments were instrumental in spawning innovations like hybrid corn that boosted the agricultural productivity worldwide. And beginning in the 50s and 60s, government-sponsored research was the midwife of the semiconductor, chip design, aeronautics, satellite, supercomputing, GPS, and internet industries. But today, small innovative companies have a very difficult time getting government support. America's $800 billion stimulus package, which you've all heard about, specifically exempts any of the money from SBR or small business investment research activities. And the availability of even simple bank loans for small firms, I'm on the board of 3 small firms. They go to the banks and they are laughed at. That money has dried up, despite the rhetoric from Washington about how the financial system has stabilized. Disruptive innovation requires available patient capital to nurture it. And in today's quarterly driven or crisis-driven economic climate, there's just not enough of that to go around anymore, not from the government, the banks, or VCs. The current regulatory climate is a 4th challenge to the innovative ecosystem. Here I'm talking about tax, legal, and other regulatory measures that make it either easier or harder for innovative new firms to be formed and grow. Now, I'm not opposed to government regulation. I don't know how anybody can be if you've sat and read the papers and watched the financial behavior that has gone on in the last few years. But even the most well-meaning regulation designed to protect the public can have unintended consequences. Consider my own country. 7 years ago, our country passed something called Sarbanes-Oxley, Financial Disclosure and Compliance Law, also called Sarbox for those who know and love it. It was put in place following various accounting scandals in the United States. You'll all remember the Enron, Adelphia, and WorldCom, to name 3. While there were certain good motives clearly behind the new Sarbox law, the actual result has been to impose significant burdens on small and medium-sized companies, and according to many experts, severely cripple the ability of innovative startups to go public. When Sarbox was first proposed in 2002, our Securities and Exchange Commission estimated the cost of compliance would be $91,000 per company. In fact, according to Dale Harding, author of a new book entitled The Decline and Fall of the American Entrepreneur, the average cost of compliance is now over $4 million a year. That's not a big deal for Microsoft. It's not a big deal for Apple or IBM or companies of that nature. But if you apply a typical stock market PE ratio for tech companies of 20 to that $4 million a year, you're talking about an $80 million penalty in market cap for small, newly public startups, a hypothetical, if you will. A small company with net income of $10 million, with, say, 30 million shares outstanding, would, all things being equal, have a stock price of around $6.60 a share and a market cap of around $200 million. If you add in the cost of Sarbox compliance to that, you'd reduce net income to $6 million. The result is a stock price of $4 and a market cap of $120 million. That's an $80 million penalty on the firm, 40% of its market cap, that inhibits its ability to fund future innovation and growth. In fact, according to Kurt Carlson, the head of SRI International, which has a business incubating startups, Sarbanes-Oxley is certainly a factor in helping to kill off the public market as an exit strategy for technology startup companies. So it's hard to see how the $400 billion in total economic cost of this well-meaning financial law has benefited society significantly. On the one hand, it has imposed real burdens on small and medium-sized firms who really, at the end of the day, pose no systemic risk to the overall economy. And on the other hand, it hasn't prevented bad behavior by large firms.